So this is a continuation of the pop-up menu in the main timeline, and by that I mean that the menu is directly in the timeline. They're not within a movie clip. So everything happens right on the main timeline. And if we run it right now, we can see that this thing is continuously going through. And so what I want to do is I want to add some stops. So here, I'll go to my code and I'll type in this, followed by stop, open and close parentheses, semicolon. And as it turns out, I'm going to need a stop when I get to the middle of the animation, so I'll go ahead and just hold the Option key down and drag that out. And as it turns out, I'm going to need a stop here and here, here and here, and all the way down. So in here, I'll click here, Shift key down, select the whole thing, hold Option, drag this out so that it's a copy there, Option, drag it out there, and drag it there. So I've got the stops in the right location. I'm going to need another keyframe at the end of every animation here for the actions, a keyframe for the actions, and that's going to tell it what frame it's supposed to go to. And that's going to look something like this. So I'll go ahead and do an F6, and I'll do a right click and actions, and I'll type this, go to capital A and stop, open and close parentheses, semicolon. And in here, I'm going to use a variable. I haven't created it yet, but I will. This is going to be called jump. Okay, so it's going to receive the jump variable, and this is what's going to tell it where to go. So this is going to be one of the label names. It'll be red, green, or blue. And that gets assigned in this frame over here when you click on the button. So the way it's going to work, let me close this. You're going to click on the black button. It's going to open everything up. And then if I click on red, red's going to say play, but also assign the variable to red. Then when I get to the end of the animation, it's going to read this in here. And the variable jump is going to say red, and then it's going to jump over the red section. Had I clicked on the blue button, the variable jump would be assigned to blue, then it would have jumped over to the blue label over here. So what that means is that I need to worry about labels. So blue, click over here, we'll call that blue, and we'll work our way backwards in here. So this one's got to be called green. One too many E's. And this one over here is going to be called red. So now we have the variables to navigate to, and this one over here is going to be our home. All right, so we'll come back over here. So we'll go to our code, actions, and we'll start programming the buttons. And they can all be programmed in the same place. So I'm going to call up my actions code. I'm going to go to, I meant my code snippets. I'm going to go to Canvas or HTML5 Canvas, open up the event handlers, select the button, the black button, and double click on mouse click event. So that adds the code for me to program this guy. So I'll get rid of this gray stuff, the comments, and in here what I simply want is to do a play. I forgot the semicolon, or rather the this. Okay, now about that variable. Normally you would assign it like this, var, and then I called it jump, and semicolon, or maybe even equals. And I would have like home as a default value. That way if it doesn't get assigned and something goes wrong, it'll always go home. Well, the problem here, fix that. The problem here is that this has to be assigned as a global variable. For some reason, it doesn't seem to work quite right. And I'll demonstrate this just with a quick little test in here. We'll go ahead and assign the jump value over here to jump. So here's what's going to happen. When I click on the black button, it's going to tell it to play, and it's going to assign the value home. And then if I click on it again, it's going to assign it to play, and it's going to assign the value home again. That's not a problem. When I come back over here, that's where it's going to receive the jump information, and it should take me back to the home frame, and it's going to look like nothing's happened. That's the way it should work. So let's take this for a test run and see what happens. So I'll click over here. The stop arrived. I'm going to click on it again, and it jumped to red. It should have gone home. And the reason why that didn't work is because this has to be assigned to a global variable. And what that means is that you don't do the VAR. And so now when I run this, command return, and we test the new version, it goes to home. And if I click on it, it should stay at home. Now it's working. So this is working correctly. The jump variable by default is being established to home, just in case it doesn't get set. And now we're ready to start programming the rest of our buttons. So open that up. And in here, I'm going to add an underscore K for black. And since I'm on the K, now I need to steal this name and give it to here. So black is always going to go home. And now I'm going to copy these, do a couple of returns. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So back to the top. The first copy is red, so that turns into an R. This turns into an R. And this turns into an R. And this turns into red, the name of the label that I want to go to. So then there's green. That turns into G, 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 and green. And last one is blue. B, B, blue. And change this to a B here. Okay, so that should do it for the first frame. Notice that these are not programmed yet, but we can test it. So if I do a command return and I go to blue, this should switch to blue. It's not going to work again. One click in here, instead of going to green, it's going to take me back to the blank black or home scene because it's not programmed to go back there yet. Now, notice that I'm not, here's the only place it's got the go to and jump to. When I get to the end of these guys here, nothing's happening. So I need this guy copied at the end of those. So hold the Option key down, drag this over there, Option key there, Option key, and there. So now my navigation is completely working. I can now bounce to the green. I can go back to the red. I can go to blue. I can even go to black again, which is the home scene. So if I open it up and I just collapse it, it'll default go back to the home scene if nothing's selected. Okay, so now the last thing I want to do is show you how to make modifications to the animation. And that's really the big advantage of having the menu bars in the main timeline, because the programming, everything is set up, it's all going to work just fine. Now I have the option to change how things happen. So I'll start off with the first animation in here. What's going on in here is that everything is collapsed right underneath it. We saw that set up that way. And just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to take the same keyframes that are located in the middle of the animation, and I'm going to pull them out here. And so now the animation starts fully opened and back. And what that does is it gives me the option to make changes to how I want this to animate. So anything you want, I'm just going to put these off to the side over here, and I'm going to stagger them so that they come in one faster than the other. And if I animate this, you'll see them just kind of fly in. And the collapse, they're still collapsing the same way. But if we take this for a test run, we can see clicking in here brings in the option to do a horizontal animation. Clicking on puts it away in here. If you want to set it up so that it looks exactly the same on the way out, except it's doing the reverse, I'm just taking these three keyframes, holding the option key down, and dragging them over here to this location. Now when I let go, it's going to remember that it's an animation, and it's going to make these blue. This really doesn't matter. The only reason I made these gray is so that you could see the cadence of the way the animation was set up. If I had left these blue throughout the whole thing, it would be harder to see the setup. So if it still bothers you, you can eliminate the animation. It'll actually still work, and I can demonstrate that just by doing a little preview here. So they collapse from, rather they open up from the side and they go away to the side. This will allow me to go to the green, and now the green's still working the same way as it always was. So is the red, I believe. And it's the home one that does something different. So it's still working, but if this bothers you that it's blue, all you have to do is go to the Insert drop-down menu and remove the classic tween. And then it starts to look more like the segments that we set up originally. So over here, I'm going to come over to this animation, and I'm going to rotate these guys as they sit in place. So this is a little extreme, but you can see what's happening. They rotate out and then they shuffle in place and end up where they're supposed to be. They're starting to collapse back in. So if I want them to rotate back in the way they came out, hold the Option key down and drag that out to that location. Again, it's going to change all these to blue. Just to keep it simple, I'll remove the classic tween. And so now the red has its own unique animation. So if I click over here, they come in sideways, go green, rather blue. It's going to go to the collapse, but red now is doing the rotation thing. When I open up red, they rotate out. When I close them, they rotate in, and they go to the next animation. So you do have some options in terms of how you want to animate it, and that's why, like I said before, this method is worth learning. Okay, so if you haven't checked out the other movie where I do the animation for the pop-up menu within a movie clip, that's worth looking at. That's actually a lot easier to set up. You just don't necessarily have the options.